What's up, y'all? This is Carter Karels with GigEm 247 here at Davis-Wade Stadium as Texas A&M just defeated Mississippi State 34-24. 6-1 now for the Aggies, 6 straight wins, 4-0 in SEC play for the first time since 2016. And yet, kind of an ugly win. Aggie fans aren't going to be very happy with this one, and understandably so. Underwhelming performance for Connor Weigman, an underwhelming performance by the Aggie defense. Some positives to highlight for sure, but you come into this game favored by 21 points. Honestly, could have even been more. It was moving all week. It started off at 14.5. Vegas loved the Aggies, and this is a team that in Mississippi State that has lost 6 straight games. They're 1-6. You could argue they're the worst team in the SEC. Lost to Toledo by, $1 billion. They lost to Florida, a team that A&M handled by $1 billion. And, you kind of look at this game, and yes, it's Starkville, and A&M has really struggled here over the years. But at the same time, this is a Mississippi State team that stinks under first-year head coach Jeff Lebby. So not a win that you feel good about, but you feel good about just winning. And I think A&M fans, after previous experiences here, losing 4 of the last 5 games they had played here, they're probably thinking, okay, at least it's a win, and a double-digit win at that. So just kind of getting into it, starting with Connor Weigman, had a pretty decent start, 6-7, 63 yards, had the 20-yard touchdown to Noah Thomas in the end zone, and you're feeling pretty good about him building off of his performance against Missouri. Yes, he had the overthrow deep to Noah Thomas early on, but had a pretty good start. And then especially in the second half, it really started to kind of crumble for him. He ended up with 2 interceptions, and really it could have been 4 or 5. Had a couple that were dropped, had a couple ill-advised throws. Mike Elko after the game said that Connor Weigman's first interception, which was the overthrow over the middle to Trey Watson, was because it slipped out of his hands, and you could kind of see that on the replay. But the one that he had in the third quarter was just an ill-advised throw that the guy just jumped on the route, and it seemed like Connor was staring down receivers and maybe throwing it late and not really anticipating throws as much as he did in the first half. And it really nearly cost this team this game. I mean, had those couple picks been caught, both of them could have been pick sixes. And my goodness, what a difference that would have made in this game. And so, we've seen it from Connor Weigman this year where he can play at an extremely high level, and other times you're like, man, what the heck is going on? So it's an up and down thing that we've seen so far. And so until he can show back to back, whether it's a great opponent, whether it's on the road, he's got to do it over a large sample size. We are in year 3 with this quarterback, and he has yet to kind of show week after week that he can consistently do it. He can show that he can light it up against a particular opponent on a particular week and impress NFL scouts, but can he do it for a 6-game stretch? We still don't really know. And so kind of concerning for the Aggies going into a showdown next week against LSU, where you're going to need really good quarterback play to win that game and potentially win a shootout type game against a pretty good LSU offense. So Connor Weigman, not the best performance for him. To his credit, he did make some nice throws. He didn't have the running game like A&M has had this season. I think they finished with around 130 rushing yards. And, Le'Veon Moss bottled up. He had a couple huge runs that were called back by penalties. Fans weren't very happy with those calls. But probably 70 or 75 yards in rushing yards that were negated by those penalties. So if those weren't called, maybe this is a different, it's another 200-yard rushing performance. Instead, not a lot of explosive runs and not a lot going for this rushing attack like we've been kind of accustomed to. only 65 yards on the day. For Le'Veon Moss was kind of banged up, it looked like, throughout the game. We saw Amari Daniels get some work as usual, but maybe a little bit more than he usually does. So that maybe factored into it some too. But, I asked Elko about Weigman, and he's talked about him and the running backs as sort of pressing in the second half, that they're kind of making mistakes that they don't normally make because maybe they were just trying to do too much. With Weigman, maybe forcing some throws he didn't need to throw, and the running backs maybe trying to break a run or make too much out of a play when, hey, you could just kind of pick the hole and go and get a sizable gain. So one of those deals where I think the offense today, they put up 34 points, but they're facing a defense that ranked near last in pretty much every category in the SEC, outside the top 100 in a lot of categories. So, you had some nice plays. You had started 9 out of 10 on third down. They ended up 9 of 14, but 9 out of 10 on third down to start the game. That's why you take a lead. That's why you take a 14-point lead. Obviously, Noah Thomas made some plays. Jabre Barber, the Troy transfer, had a really great game. Had the huge play on the third down that set up a nice scoring drive for the Aggies. And really the first big game that he's had. Had the Liz Frank injury in the offseason that kept him out of the first few games, and it's been kind of a slow roll for him this season. Obviously, he kind of started to look a little bit like himself against Arkansas, and I think now maybe he's hitting his stride. So if he can produce for this offense, that's a really good sign, especially because they were without Terry Bussey today. So in addition to Noah Thomas and Jade Walker and that receiver group, you need maybe that third or fourth guy to emerge, whether it's Moose Muhammad, Terry Bussey, Cyrus Allen, or in this case, Jabre Barber. So a standout performance for him. We saw Chase Basantis go down with what looked to be a pretty serious injury early in the game. I think second quarter, kind of got rolled up from behind, left leg injury. Elko said it was a lower leg. So, if it's an ankle instead of a knee, maybe that's a good thing, but didn't have a big status report there after the game. They filled in, they replaced him initially with TJ Shanahan. They also got Cam Dewberry some work there. I think A&M can withstand that injury, but Basantis is a good player, and you don't want to see that kid go down. And so something to watch for sure. Defensively, and maybe I should have started with this, kind of reminiscent to the Arkansas game, where very beginning of the game you're like, man, this defense has got some problems, and kind of toward the end of the game you're feeling a lot better about the group. Still some concerns. I mean, they're facing a true freshman quarterback. You probably wished that they were a little bit more dominant. But, you start the game, you give up the touchdown drive. I think they had 17 points at half. They had almost 60 rushing yards on that first drive. They were just running the ball at will. I'm looking over here right now. Mike Elko is with his family taking photos, so that's pretty cool. But taking photos on the field. But, yeah, about 60 rushing yards on that first drive. I think they had 90 rushing yards in the first quarter. And then by the end of the game, Mississippi State, I think, ended with 120. So final three quarters, only 30 rushing yards. Same thing with the quarterback. Michael Van Buren had about 170 passing yards in that first half. In the second half, he had only about 50 or 60, and a lot of it maybe came toward the end when they're kind of in prevent. So I think the defense did a lot better job after that first quarter and really after that first half of kind of settling down, making tackles, making plays, responding. Connor Weigman throws that pick, and what happens? Scooby Williams gets a pick himself. And this defense had those turnovers that kind of kept this team from, getting in a really bad spot there. There were multiple instances tonight where it looked like Mississippi State could really make this a game, and A&M just made one extra play, one extra deal to, keep themselves ahead, whether it was, that Scooby Williams pick, or there was that sequence where Cassius Howell and Torian York had, sacks back to back. But overall, the defense, you're not feeling great about the performance, but you have to respect that they adjusted and finished the game pretty well. Where does that leave us? 34-24 for Texas A&M. And again, this is a venue that Aggie fans despise. 4 of the last 5 before this game, they lose. And so you almost had a feeling that something bad might happen. In that first drive, it's like, here we go again. But something that, I kind of want to highlight that Mike Elko was kind of hammering home in his post-game press conference was, think about where this team was the last couple of years. He hasn't always liked talking about last year. He doesn't like when reporters ask his players a lot about last year. But he mentioned the last couple of years, this is a team that won 12 games combined and was losing road games left and right. Entered this season on a 10-game road losing streak, and someone's honking at me. They hear 10-game road losing streak, and they said honk. 10-game road losing streak. Now they've won 3 games away from Kyle Field, and 6-1, 4-0 in the SEC. Elko mentioned multiple times in his press conference, like, think about where we were the last couple of years. Yes, it's ugly, but 6-1, 4-0. You're creeping up on a top 10 ranking based off the results this weekend. And I agree, but it is concerning that they have won a lot of ugly games. I don't think that they were in jeopardy of losing this game, but Bowling Green, Arkansas, there's a couple in there where a couple different things happen, and maybe this team is 4-3 instead of 6-1. Have to give them the credit for finishing out these games and figuring it out. But when you're facing tougher opponents, whether it's LSU, whether it's Texas, whether it's a road game coming up at South Carolina, where, hey, they've played some good teams pretty well. Nearly beat LSU, nearly beat Bama, absolutely demolished a bad OU team today. South Carolina on the road is not going to be a joke. That's a game that this team's going to have to take seriously. And so, yes, they're 6-1, and yes, you have to feel good about that. But they can't keep winning ugly. They got to look more like they looked against Missouri than what they looked like today, what they looked like against Bowling Green, and maybe what they looked like against Arkansas and Notre Dame as well. And so you don't want to overreact and just say, oh man, this team stinks because of this because of this close win today. Because, hey, it's still 2 weeks removed from what they did against Missouri, and they're still 6-1 and in really, really good shape going into the rest of the season. But you want to be cautious and say, hey, this is a team that out of 7 games so far, really only 2 of them, McNeese State and Missouri, they've played a complete awesome game. And you could even argue against McNeese State, it wasn't pretty at times. So that's where we kind of stand. And going into next week, LSU showdown in Kyle Field will likely be a night game for Texas A&M. Man, what a matchup that'll be. If that team can beat LSU, we've been starting to talk a little bit more, we meaning the media and the national media, this is a team that can maybe make the playoff in year 1 under head coach Mike Elko. And you win that game, and that reality that possibility becomes a lot more of a possibility. So 34-24 here for Texas A&M. That's about all from me. My ears, I may have been shouting this entire time because, you know, it's an open air press box here with the cowbells. My first game I've ever covered at Mississippi State. So of course I didn't bring noise canceling headphones. Of course I did not come prepared, and my ears, I can't hear myself talk right now. So sorry for all the shouting, but we'll be back next week when Texas A&M plays LSU, and we will see you then. Thanks for listening.